Welcome to another episode of the On Data Management Podcast, powered as always by HS GovTech. I'm your host, Cameron Garrison. As you know, this podcast endeavors to bring you the thought leaders and leading folks in experience around the world of EH, from food safety to septic and other things. Today's conversation guest has this particular category in spades, especially on the food safety side. I don't normally do this, but I usually just top of head we'll do an introduction for a guest. But and today's guest has so much attributed to his name. Been a busy guy, been doing this for a long time, that I'm actually going to, for those of you on the video feed, yes, I am going to be reading some bullet points so that I don't miss anything in introducing today's guest. Really delighted to have today with us Dr. David McSwane, who is the Executive Director of CFP, which is the Conference for Food Protection. It's been talked about on a couple of episodes in the last few weeks because there's other folks that are participate in it that have been here. And I think all of them have the same opinion. You need to not only understand what CFP is and what it's doing, but how you could get involved because they're doing really, really important work. So Dr. McSwane, in addition to his current role at CFP, prior to that, he's been on the faculty at Indiana University. He was the administrator of the Monroe County Health Department in Bloomington, Indiana, was a public sanitarian. He's also a professor of the School of Public and Environmental Affairs in Indiana. His teaching and research interests have focused on environmental factors that cause human illness and injury. He teaches in courses in environmental health, specializing specifically in food science and sanitation, epidemiology, environmental health policy, and environmental science. And he's also, as if that's not enough to keep a person busy, he's also authored many things, from articles in peer-reviewed journals to writing really the definitive guide in several areas, the Essentials of Food Safety and Sanitation Training Series, and other textbooks as well. So without further ado, welcome virtually into the Beyond Data Management Studios, David McSwane, Dr. David McSwane from Conference for Food Protection, someone I've enjoyed getting to know over the past few years. Thank you, sir, so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Cameron. As I mentioned before, we're always happy to spread the word about the Conference for Food Protection. So I look forward to spending time with you today and sharing information that I hope will be maybe a review for some, but hopefully new information for others. But in the end, I hope we generate some excitement about CFP in all of your viewers.
Yeah, and I guarantee you that we will do exactly that. I think you came to CFP in 2012. People really like when folks that have spent their life dedicated to this field, learning just their story. Starting with how did you kind of discover it and find what became a lifelong passion, and maybe some of your career highlights in the field and in the trenches along the way that led to the big seat that you're in now at the Conference for Food Protection.
Well, I think probably like a lot of people, when I was maybe in my teenage years, I didn't think, boy, I really want to become an environmental health specialist. And back then we would have called ourselves a public health sanitarian. So I actually, as an undergraduate student, was on a pre-med curriculum. And I decided in a couple of the summers while I was in college that I would work at a major hospital in Indianapolis as an orderly. And I spent 1 year working in the orthopedic wing and 1 year in urology. And it just sort of dawned on me that I really don't like being around sick people all that much. So, being a doctor didn't seem like a really good fit for me. So I sort of went off sideways and started looking for, what can you do with a degree in biology and a minor in chemistry? So I wasn't sure that I wanted to go into the pharmaceutical business, and it happened to be that my father managed a Kraft Foods plant in Indiana, and he said, we have people from the state health department coming in from time to time doing inspections for sanitation and evaluating our manufacturing processes. Maybe that would be something that you'd find interesting. And so I ended up, my very first job was with the Indiana State Department of Health. Unfortunately, I did not get into the retail food section. I was in general sanitation, which caused me to work with mobile home parks and motels and hotels and any facility that had sort of a semi-public sewage treatment plant and water supply. But I really found out that public health was my niche, and I enjoyed it, and I thought there was not only opportunities to make a difference, but I found that it was something that was satisfaction, had a great deal of satisfaction associated with it. So I thought, well, I need to know more about this public health stuff. So that's what took me to Bloomington, Indiana, which is where the Monroe County Health Department was located. I enrolled there in a master's in public health program and worked part-time for the health department and was a part-time student. And that's where I really was introduced to the whole realm of food safety. And I did, restaurants and supermarkets. We did institutional food service like schools and facilities of that nature. And that was really, I think, where I saw my fit. And so while I was at the health department, I did some guest lecturing at the university about environmental health. I really liked the teaching part too. So that led me to actually becoming an instructor at Indiana University. And that was the rank I could hold without a doctorate. And so the people I worked for said, well, we'll reduce some of your faculty load if you'll continue and get a doctorate, which I did. And then I spent really almost 40 years at Indiana University teaching in different academic units, but all in the field of environmental health. And almost always my area of research and service interests were in food safety. So I've had a great run. I had retired from the university in 2013, and that's when I became the executive director for the Conference for Food Protection. I've
Wow.
actually been a member of the conference since about 1986. So though my official role didn't start till 2012, I've been an advocate and an active member of CFP. I've been a member of the academic caucus, obviously, in that period of time, and have found it to be a really unique organization that does a lot of really good things. So
It really
I've
is.
enjoyed it, and I'm now happy to have the opportunity to be the executive director of the group.
And that is quite a journey. And obviously, you must love teaching, because to do that for 40 years is you have to have a passion, right? What is it? It's so remarkable. Every director, even at the local public health level that has come on, they all say the same thing, which basically you did. They're going to the end of the high school career and going into college. They didn't even know this existed. And they had totally different plans for life until they stumbled into it and it captured them. And they found their passion and their calling. What is it that keeps it so obscure that you don't see people aspire to it? In a lot of cases, it's gotten so little promotion, they don't even know it exists.
Well, and I just think that it's because when people think of the health field, they think of things like nursing and pharmacy and medicine, and they just don't understand what public health and preventive medicine is all about, which is, kind of the unique thing, because my original appointment at Indiana University was in the School of Medicine, but we were in allied health and we're a department of preventive medicine. So it's sort of ran county or intuitive to have a program that was really designed to put physicians out of work when you're in a school of medicine. But again, we think they go hand in hand, and during my career spent a lot of time teaching physicians and others about the importance of public health and the benefits that come from prevention of disease and disability, as well as curing those people who unfortunately may be victims of that disease. But yeah, I just think it's not something that is necessarily in vogue. A lot of the work of public health is done behind the scenes, and so it just doesn't get the visibility, I think, that some of the other professions have. But and even in the students that I taught, because we had both undergraduate and graduate programs at the university, and none of them really even came to the university saying, I want to get a degree in environmental health. Most of these were students that were in the sciences, but decided that maybe they just didn't like or didn't think they would like careers that were associated strictly with biology or chemistry, or even we had some students that were in one of the other allied health fields and came over, and nursing even. So, but once they got to us and once they found out about us, I think they were much like me, and they said, this is really exciting. There's a lot of opportunities to make a difference. And I think in the end, they graduated and were happy with their careers, and many of them are still working today. So it's just a matter that I think, once we can make them aware of what it is, and give them a taste, they really like what they find.
Yeah, it's a universal story. Sarah Jensen, who's involved in CFP, we just had her on very recently, and she was talking about it's part marketing problem, right? And she was encouraging, especially at the local level, to participate. If area high schools have a job fair or something they can participate in, socialize and market who you are and what you're doing better. In all of the different chairs you've sat in, including academic, do you think it's a part marketing problem? And what have you seen that works to spread the word?
Well, again, I think just being able to reach people and create awareness is step number one. And I know when I was at the health department, we actually published a quarterly newsletter that talked about activities associated with the department and what we were doing and what our staff was involved with, what our sort of priorities were, because some of the work is seasonal in nature. So, if we were coming into the spring and summer, we would focus on the things associated with swimming pools and campgrounds and things of that nature. And I think, we always made sure that those were sent to both high school and middle school to, again, oftentimes the guidance counselors and the administration, so that they were being informed of kind of what our program is, what our department does, and some of the activities of our staff. And so that's obviously very critical. And we also tried to always establish good relationships with the local media, so that, when there was opportunities to talk about the things we do, they would reach out to us. And so anything to create awareness and raise visibility was always a priority.
Yeah. Got to get that next generation in place, and to fill when it's time for all of us to shuffle off that stage.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the average age of our profession is continuing to increase. So
it is. Yeah, it is.
And we certainly need to get that infusion of new blood of the students that are coming in, and that both are formerly trained, as well as those who maybe are trained in the other sciences and have crossed over into some field of public health or environmental health.
So you're at CFP now, and I tell you, I was at the one in Houston, and I think it's one of the best kept secrets to a lot of folks, even in health departments. I think you have a lot of like level 1, level 2 inspectors that have a fuzzy concept at best of how the food code that they're actually using and administering in their inspections is actually made, how it evolves. So maybe initially talk about CFP kind of at the top level, what it is, the role. It's funny that it's called a conference, because while it certainly is that, it feels more like a congressional body, right? Like you've got your subcommittee process with the councils, and it goes to a floor vote of delegates. It's just a fascinating. Sarah Jensen, again, who was on recently, implored anybody who's not been involved. She's like, it's $100 for 2 years. You please do yourself a favor and get involved and at least go to one, so that you can have a better understanding of what's happening. But directly from you, talk about it, overall mission, purpose, and then you just had a conference in Denver, which I know we'll get into, but floor is yours to unpack what is CFP.
Well, maybe I ought to start with a little bit about the history, because the Conference for Food Protection actually met for the first time in 1971. So as an organization, we're over 50 years old. And we've been, again, probably what makes us rather unique is we're probably the only organization that is open to a variety of different professions, and at the same time almost is exclusively focused on retail food safety. But in 1971, the first meeting was actually convened cooperatively by the Food and Drug Administration and the American Public Health Association. And the focus at that time was on microbial hazards and pathogens associated with foodborne illness, which, as you can imagine, was really the number one food safety issue at the time. It was things, and it wasn't the things that we know of today, like E. coli and norovirus and listeria. It was about Staph aureus and botulism and some of the things that may, and salmonella, things that may still be prevalent today, but were definitely front page back in the early 1970s. The group then kind of took a hiatus and met the second time in 1984. And the focus of the conference at that point was expanded to include not only the microbiological, but the toxicological hazards associated with food safety. And again, we were thinking about both in terms of natural toxins such as shigatoxin or scrombotoxin. Again, botulism toxin would be a major one, but also that we were looking at or starting to look at the impact of chemical intoxications from pesticides and cleaners and sanitizers and things of that nature. So and we've kind of maintained that focus ever since. In 1986, which was the third meeting of the group, that's when the organization and the people who were at that point on the executive board said, we really can't sustain this farm to table approach that we've tried to when we've talked about the microbial and the toxicological pathogens. We need to limit our focus so that we can provide all of our resources to something that will make a difference. And they decided that what that something was retail food safety and what was going on at retail. Now, that's not to say that the conference is not interested in what happens to products upstream from the retail establishment and even downstream in terms of the consumer items. But it's our focus is really from the back door to the front door of the establishment, and we've kind of sustained that. In 1986, also they sort of formalized the structure of the conference by creating the boards, creating the councils, creating the assembly of delegates, and the things that still are pretty much the foundation for the organization even today. So it's been an interesting turn of events, but here we are, as I said, 54 years later, and we are still very active and still have a lot of impact on retail food safety. And as far as the mission of the conference, basically we say that our mission is to identify emerging problems related to retail food safety and find workable solutions. With that, we're also making sure that we try to balance the interests of the various constituent groups and also to provide an open forum for the exchange of ideas from all these sources. We understand that people come at food safety from a different perspective, and we want to know what all of those perspectives are so that hopefully, in the end, what we're doing is coming up with solutions that are created through collaboration and consensus building.
And that's what's amazing. It's one of the most remarkable things, especially when you go to one for the first time, because you obviously have all the regulators and the state delegates, but you have a big industry contingent. I mean, the one in Denver, Waffle House, and even ones that, like, if you ask somebody on the street, hey, who do you think would be in the mix, in the room from industry. And I think a lot of people wouldn't think of brands like Waffle House, but there they are and clearly are supporters and are active. But you also have a lot of science that gets into some of these issues as well, right? In the academic world. So you're mixing a lot of vastly different cultures and people coming at things from a different perspective, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And that, again, is one of our other objectives. We want to make sure that we are promoting sound science as a foundation for food safety regulations at retail. And we think we do a really good job because of the diversity of our membership. And you talked about, some of the unique companies that are attending, but we even just within the food industry constituency that we have restaurants, we have supermarkets, we have vending and distribution, we have companies that are in food processing that sell to their own retail outlets and in some cases generic brands to other retailers as well. We have companies that sell products and services to these retailers, such as cleaning and sanitizing agents, pest control and services and products and so forth. So, and of course we have regulators from all three levels of government. We have the federal, state, local. We have in some cases district and territorial governments that are involved. We also, as you mentioned, have academia. These are faculty who typically are teaching at either food science departments or programs where they offer degrees in public health and environmental health. And so that certainly helps us with the science side as well as the science that is available through our regulatory and industry constituencies. We also have consumers involved. Now, this is not the consumer as if we're thinking of the person who's purchasing food. These are consumers that are employees or agents and executive directors of organizations that represent consumer advocacy groups. So things like, Stop Foodborne Illness would be an example. And we have a lot of emeritus members as well, people who have retired from food safety, but want to at least remain active. They may no longer have an official job, if you will, but they still want to keep their thumb on the pulse of what's going on in retail food safety. And
that's a remarkable one.
There's emeritus category as well.
And it's embarrassing for me because I'm not able to recall the name, but in Denver, the most recent one, I met a gentleman who was retired, has been for some time. I was chatting with him, and he was really proud about the fact that he's been at every one since the first one. And I asked him, I said, well, because he's getting older, and I said, so what keeps you coming back? You're retired and you're here. And he says, I'll never miss one unless I'm physically unable to do it. You could just see the enthusiasm for it. Even though he's not active, he's going to be there anytime you've got the doors open.
If I had to venture a guess, I'd say that might have been Gail Prince.
That's it.
And
Gail Prince.
He was involved in the Kroger company for many, many years. And after he retired from there, he started working with a consulting group, and he's been doing that for a lot of years. The guy is, I don't know how old he really is, but he's sure active. He never stops. And he's a really great guy and a great asset for us to have at CFP.
You can tell he loves it. He's there for the passion. So you guys have an outsized role in actually what ends up in the food code. So maybe, and if there's a different, better place through way to come at it, feel free. But what is the relationship with FDA? And, I don't know that they teach this in school anymore, which maybe probably we're worse for it. But you remember way back in the day, the how a bill becomes a law kind of thing. I think there was an old cartoon about that from the 60s.
Well, there actually was a whole program that was based upon that idea.
But same concept here, right? To a degree, you are making regulatory rules and are a big part of the process. How does all that work? All the sausage making of, something from a concept or somebody really wants to push something, getting through CFP, and then how does it end up becoming part of an official code?
Well, let me first clarify. CFP is not making rules and regulations, but we certainly do have a great impact, we think, on the food code.
It's recommendations,
and it all
right?
Begins with an issue, and issues are sort of the cornerstone of the CFP process. And basically, an issue consists of a problem that someone has identified, and anyone can submit an issue. They don't have to be a CFP member. They don't have to be on a committee, although our committees oftentimes do submit issues based upon work that they've been doing throughout the biennium leading up to the biennial meeting. But these issues basically identify problems that they believe are that exist within retail food establishments at some level or in some form or fashion. They identify what they view as the public health significance of those problems, and then they provide recommendations on what they would like to see done to address those problems and whatever that may entail. So those issues then that are submitted, and they are reviewed by our issue committee, which is one of the standing committees of the conference. And it's not really to in any way censure anything. We simply are making sure that it sort of falls within the mission and the scope of the conference. But if it's legitimate, whether we think that there's, it's as long as it's feasible, we're gonna accept it. And then those issues are assigned to one of three councils. And council one is laws and regulations. Council 2 deals with administration, education, and certification. And Council 3 deals with issues that are related to science and technology. And those issues that have been submitted are vetted. The individuals who are the submitters have an opportunity to provide testimony. about their issue. And of course, then people from the floor can speak. People who are members of the council can speak on those. And then in the end, then the council is expected to take one of three courses of action. They can either accept the issue as it was originally submitted. They can amend the issue, and primarily this is going to be the recommendations associated with the issue, or they can take action to say that we don't really think that any action should be taken on this matter. And usually that's done in cases where they believe that maybe there's more than one issue dealing with the same topic that's been submitted to that council. So they think one may be better at addressing or coming from a practical standpoint than the one that they're taking no action on. They may feel that, again, it's already being addressed by something in the food code or elsewhere. But anyway, those are the three options. And all of the issues, regardless of the action taken by a council, then go to sort of the final step in this process, which is our Assembly of Delegates. And they have really the final say on all of the issues that are submitted to the conference. The Assembly, for those people who may not be familiar, are representatives from state, either departments of public health, departments of agriculture. In the case of Florida, we actually even have DPBR, which is the Department of Professional and Business Development. So, there's can be more than one agency represented per state. We also have the District of Columbia that oftentimes sends a delegate, as well as we have some territories like Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, etc. And so all of these jurisdictions, at least the states, have one vote, which can be divided in just halves or thirds, depending on how many agencies are represented at the Assembly. The districts and the territories each get a half vote, but then they, in turn, have the opportunity to consider each and the recommendations coming out of the councils, and they can either, it's pretty much a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or they can vote to, if they vote against the council's recommendation to take no action, then usually that item is assigned to the executive board, and they then create an ad hoc committee that will study the matter further and come up with some additional recommendations. In the end, though, the recommendations that are accepted by the Assembly are put forth to agencies like the FDA, USDA, FSIS, CDC, and even some of the other non-regulatory agencies like ANSI or NSF and so forth. And then, those agencies then respond to us as to whether they accept them as submitted, whether they want to revise them slightly, or if they think that at this point in time they simply, while they may be a good idea, it's just not feasible to do what was recommended associated with the issue. We have memoranda of understanding with all of those organizations, and so this is sort of part of our relationship. And again, those that FDA will accept as our recommendations, as you mentioned, do frequently end up as additions to a future edition of the food code, either in terms of the code itself or in terms of one of the annexes that is part of the code.
It's just a fascinating process. The delegates, when they vote, I thought that was one of the more intriguing. I remember in Houston 2 years ago, what really caught my eye is that the passion, it's a very professional environment, and people are very respectful and professional. But there are times on certain issues where it gets intense, doesn't it? The one thing I remember in Houston is somebody was frantically running around the floor, making sure every delegate got a copy of a flyer they had printed up. They were the opponents on an issue, if I recall. And a couple of the floor speeches were very, very passionate. How often, or do you have a rough feel for what's the breakdown between things that just make sense and they kind of breeze through, and the things that are thorny, and how often does it get difference of opinion that gets debated and sorted by the delegates?
Well, I think the good news is, and something we're really proud of, is that obviously the composition of our councils is very inclusive. So we have 22 members seated on a council. That is the council chair and vice chair plus 20 other people. In councils 1 and 2, there's an equal distribution between regulatory and industry. And again, this is how we assure that we get the input from all of our constituent groups. And then also academia is represented by one seat on the council as the consumer. So that comprises the councils for 1 and 2. Council 3 is a little bit different in that because it is science and technology, we have 5 regulators, 5 industry representatives that are appointed, and then we have what are thought of as 10 at-large positions. And these could be people, again, there could be more academics if we believe that they're working on science and research that will take care of what's going on related to or have knowledge about substance associated with an issue that's submitted. These could be additional people from regulatory and or the industry. And certainly in Council 3, which is unique, we actually can have representatives from our federal partners who are seated as a member of the council. And the other cases, the federal agency partners, which were ours, again, FDA, USDA, and CDC, they have consultants that act as advisors to each of the councils, but they're not actually voting members, except in the case it is possible on Council 3. And again, it really depends on the expertise of that individual. And we have had in the past someone from EPA, even though EPA don't think of as a food safety organization. They do a lot of work dealing with things like chemicals that are used for sanitizers and pesticides and so forth that do impact food safety. So there have been times when these people have been brought on as consultants to the councils as well, when we think that there are specific issues and recommendations that would benefit from their knowledge and expertise.
Very balanced and very thorough. Which is you're trying to give everybody with a relevant angle on it a seat at the table, which in this culture
to feel like they're a part of the process. And again, everybody may not agree on the outcome of that process, and that's probably it's just the way things are. Yeah. When you deal with somewhat controversial issues, not everybody is going to be happy with the outcome, but we think they're more accepting of the outcome simply because they believe that they or someone who represents their interests have been a part of the process. And again, I think that the point I really was trying to get to was, I think maybe this is why we don't have a lot of contentious arguments in the assembly, because we think a lot of this discussion has already taken place before the issue ever is forwarded to the assembly for consideration.
Yeah,
but
gated very well.
There's always going to be certain things, and people at the council level and at the assembly level, they're very passionate, and while we are, as you said, we are respectful and the process is formal, we certainly don't want to discourage people from being passionate about any phase of food safety at retail.
Yeah, free speech is alive and well at CFP.
It is.
So you had just finished in Denver. It was just as an aside, the Local Arrangements Committee, which was the host city of Denver, and Troy from the Environmental Health Department there at the state. I thought they did a fabulous job just from a setup perspective. Great conference. But you just came through it. Were there any issues that were, if not controversial, interesting, or of particular import this year that you would want to say anything about or talk about from the conference that just wrapped up?
I think obviously always one of the what I consider the highlights, if you will, from any of our biennial meetings is the formation of council committees. And in some cases, committees may be recreated. In other cases, they're simply new committees that are being created. And usually if a committee is being recreated, it's either because they haven't finished all of their charges or they've been assigned new charges. So I would think that there's 2 or 3 council committees that are, well, of the 8, I think they're all interesting and they're all going to be very beneficial once their work is completed. In the case of Council 1, there were actually 3 committees created. There was an allergen committee, and their focus now is looking at labeling requirements for allergens in foods that are self-service by consumers, and how you make the consumers aware of allergens and protection of allergens and how to prevent cross contact and so forth. I think that's big. We have a major initiative going on as far as digital food safety, where we're looking at methods and approaches that we can use to, as far as digital food safety, to support both the regulatory and the regulated communities as well. One of the committees in Council 3 also is the Food Safety Culture Retail Committee. This group has been actively involved as well, and in the past, and they're simply, one of their recommendations is going to be to try to get the FDA and CDC to agree on what should be standard language related to food safety culture, and it will hopefully appear in a future edition of the food code.
Oh, that'll be really nice to get that aligned.
Yeah, because I think we all understand that a big element of retail food safety involves the culture within an establishment.
Yeah.
And it needs to be at the corporate level, but it also needs to be at the mom and pop level, and it certainly needs to be at the unit level. And so anything we can do to help establish a culture that says we follow food safety principles and practices because we know it's important and because we're committed to it, as opposed to we are required to do it, is going to be always in the best interest of the consuming public.
What are some of the natural obstacles there on that particular topic? Is it training? Is it language barriers? Is it some others that aren't commonly thought of? All of the above? Is it because it can't just be that people don't care, right? There must be other obstacles that you're dealing with.
I think in some respects, it's all of those things that you've identified. It could be a language issue, but I think in some cases too, part of the challenge, of course, in the retail food industry in general is turnover. And, you just get someone trained to the point where they're really functioning at what we would think of as a high level. They're doing the kinds of things that we want them to. And
they leave.
They move on, and they may go to a different retailer, or they may get out of the business completely. And the other part of it is we deal with a very young population when we're dealing with retail food handlers. Most of them probably 25 and under. They're very mobile, and they come and go. And of course, as you know, just staffing in general right now is always a challenge. So, but I think as far as the culture, it begins with really commitment on the part of management. And again, this is both at the corporate level, if you will, and also it is important at the unit level, that it simply is an expectation, and management is doing everything it can to serve as a role model for what should be done. They're rewarding people for doing things right. They're helping to correct problems when they see it if people are doing things wrong. And it's just a matter of constant reinforcement. We think training is pretty good. But the disconnect is taking the training and applying it in the workplace.
Yeah, actually knowing what to do with it.
Doing it on a sustained basis. And that's always going to be it's always going to be a challenge. But if it's built in sort of the culture of the enterprise, then it's going to be easier to correct. And it has to be ongoing. Training it's not a one and done kind of thing. You have to be trained, but then you also have to have continuous training and refreshers and reminders on the job.
Repetition.
To keep you aware.
A lot of repetition. So for people that working in local or state departments that maybe up until this point, maybe they knew a little, maybe they didn't know much, but they're like, wow, how do I get involved? Now, I think there's a couple of things there. I think people would wonder, how are the delegates selected? But short of even that, for somebody who this is their passion, and maybe they're an inspector, whatever their role is at a local agency, and they want to be a part of what they're hearing about, what's the roadmap for that look like, and how do people get active in supporting and participating with you guys?
The first thing, obviously, is become a member of the Conference for Food Protection. And as Sarah said, it's a bargain. $100 for 2 years is a pretty good deal. And if they become a member, then they are eligible to attend our biennial meetings. They will get, we produce a lot of correspondence through our listserv and share information about activities of our committees and so forth. And we would like for them to really sort of take the first biennium and just kind of get settled in, follow things, understand, go to the biennial meeting, understand how the conference process works. And then after they've done that, we would welcome them to apply for membership on one of the council or standing committees for the next biennium. And they can, just about all of our work is done virtually. So it's not like they're going to have to spend a lot of time and money on travel. It's there will be probably about 8 hours a month, maybe, of committee work, and people can either be voting members of a committee or they could be at large, which enables them to participate but not vote on matters being undertaken by the committee. And a lot of people just like that. They use it as an opportunity to observe and learn. And to, again, kind of find out kind of how the conference is moving in regard to some of the charges that these committees are undertaking. But those are the best ways. After they've attended a biennial meeting or two, they certainly, and again, if they're active on committees, they can apply to be on council. And again, we certainly emphasize the importance of having a reasonably good representation of our various constituent groups and also geographical distribution. So with that in mind, anybody can be considered and they can apply and could be selected to serve on a council. But we're dealing basically with 22 members for each council, so the competition is pretty rigorous. But
yeah, that's not a lot of spots.
If you brought something, well, you can do, and you could be selected to serve on a council.
It is the best $100 that if you're in this field, you can spend. So we'll put in the description on all the platforms to this a link to the membership, and anything else that you want us to post in there, you feel free to send it to us and we'll put it there so people could literally just, if you look, by the time this is online and you're watching it, you can click right below the episode, sign up for it. Again, best $100 you'll spend. And it is a 2-year cycle. I think that can lead to a misnomer. Oh, I show up every 2 years. There's a lot of work that happens in between, right? What's that? What's the interconference period look like? What are you all doing, and what's happening between conferences?
All right. Well, right now we're in the process of forming our committees for this current biennium, and that process, usually we have a 30-day window in which people can apply. This year we've had over 375 individuals apply for committee membership, either council committees or standing committees, which is excellent. I mean, it shows the level of interest and enthusiasm that people have. Obviously, we can't accommodate all of them as voting members, but we certainly would welcome them as at-large members so that they can keep apprised of what's going on within those committees that are of particular interest to them. Once those committees are formed, then they really start. And our next meeting is in April of 2027. So essentially, they're going to have about probably 22 or 23 months to do their work, and it's something that in order to be sure to get everything done in time, and of course, most of their work needs to be done at least 6 months ahead of the actual meeting itself, because then we have to go through the issue submission process and all of that, which is built in, and then we have to submit the issues to the general membership 40 days in advance of the biennial meeting. So literally, to meet sort of our timeline, those committees have to have their work done probably no later than November of the year prior to the start of the biennial meeting, which again, and 27 will be in April. So by November, December, they're going to have their work done, and then they can kind of sit back and relax, and they'll sort of be on hold until the meeting itself, at which time then their issues and others will be assigned and vetted by council.
That's and it's in Minneapolis in 27, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
I don't know why I substituted Minneapolis, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and if you join now, you'll get to see a lot of the stuff they distribute, and you'll have a lot of time to plan your trip to Grand Rapids. So,
And by the way, if they register for the meeting in Grand Rapids, their membership for the next biennium is included with their registration fee. So they won't have to pay the $100 ever again if they go to
wow,
the biennial meeting. So it's even a better deal.
wow, you guys are running all sorts of specials.
Yeah, do whatever we can to get people who are passionate about retail food safety into our organization. We would love it.
Briefly on the industry, I think it's one of the things that you do well that is not necessarily always done, especially at the local or state department level, but you collaborate with industry as partners. It, if it is answerable in sort of an encapsulated way, I know it's probably more complex than that, but if you're talking to directors at a department or agency level, what advice would you give them on how to engage with industry and, not end up veering towards adversarial, and how to work with them?
Well, I think the real key is that, I view regulators as people who are actually consultants to the industry. They have a job to do. Obviously, their role is to make sure that retail food establishments comply with the rules and regulations of food safety. But there are sort of what I think of as the right way to do that and the wrong way to do that. And the right way is to sort of go in and work with them in a non-adversarial role, and also establish communication. I think the industry would welcome that, and I think it's really that open communication is the basis upon which the relationship is built, and then we always want the industry to feel like the health department is their friend. So don't view the inspector and the inspection as being a traumatic experience. View it as a learning experience. View it as something that is designed to make their operation better.
Yeah.
And hopefully in time, then that will result in something where the inspection becomes very routine, and in most instances, the manager of an establishment who's on top of it is going to know if he's got problems. He doesn't need the regulators to come in and tell him that.
Yeah, and a lot of the big chains spend a lot of money to sort of govern and regulate or police themselves as well, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah, and I who knows what's going on in the future of retail food safety at this point. Is still kind of a state of chaos in Washington, but I think what we can safely say is that there's going to be less money available at the federal, state, and probably local levels for regulators to do their jobs. And so what this is probably going to require is a shift more toward a risk-based approach to inspections, where they're going to just target, those establishments that they believe create the higher levels of risk. And this could be because of the number of people that they provide food for, the type of people they provide food for in terms of, are they highly susceptible populations, et cetera. It could be based upon, the past history of sanitation scores and so forth. But, it's they're going to have to really focus their resources on those facilities that they think will benefit most from their inspection services, and not only inspections, also follow-up consultation and so forth. So
there's almost no way
that shifts a lot of the burden off to the industry. Yeah. So, corporates and the corporations with a lot of stores, they probably have the resources to do a lot of this work on their own, or they hire third-party auditing companies and others that help them to supplement their work. But it's for those facilities that don't have that level of resources available to them, they're going to have to work even closer with the health departments and the regulators there to make sure that they're getting maximum benefit and return on their inspection services.
Absolutely. I think every bit of that is right. there's never going to be enough resources to go into every establishment 2 times, 4 times like the old model.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so true. And you actually touched on what I was going to ask you next. In given your position and just gravitas and longevity and food safety particularly, I think you have a unique perspective on this, or an angle on it potentially, because you see it from a different angle than at the department level locally. But it's the number one question I get asked out and around the country. What do you think's actually happening? What's with federal cutting and things of that nature? Of course, I could guess, but I have no idea. I think that's part of the problem with the environment right now is it's pretty hard to predict. But big picture, what are you seeing? What do you think is likely to probably vex us and hang around for a while? And do you see any bright spots where you think there could potentially in the future be an open door to maybe restore some things that are under threat right now?
Well, I'm certainly hopeful that will be the case. I've been, and I think most of the people that I've interact with, our biggest concerns have always come from the fact that, there's been very little what I'll call logic that has been used with making some of the budget cuts that have been made. As the term that I hear used by the media is the slash and burn approach.
Yeah.
Nobody's really bothered to consider both short-term and long-term what's the impact, of those cuts. I understand, and I think we're all supportive of government efficiency and cutting out fraud and waste and whatever. But, cutting programs, across the board, reduction in force across the board, it doesn't spell well. And unfortunately, too, as the budgets at the federal level have been cut, a lot of that money has in the past and would have continued to be shifted to states to help them conduct their programs and services. And that really, at the state and local level, in the vast majority of cases, is where the work is done. And of course, the less federal dollars that come to the states, the less money the states would have to give to the locals. So, it's kind of, it's trickle down, but not in the way we had kind of hoped that it would become. So,
yeah, it's trickling out.
I don't know. I think we will see a recovery. I think people at some point will see the error of their ways. I think they will begin to restore some of these programs. But it's my concern in some respects is the people who have been rift may decide, hey, I don't want to work here anymore, and we are losing people with a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and a great deal of commitment in the whole gamut of food safety, and that includes not only the work of FDA, but also USDA and certainly CDC, and it takes food safety is a three-legged stool. You got to have all of those 3 federal agencies working together in order to make it efficient, and then they in turn have to work with the states, and the states have to work with locals. But I'm afraid we're going to see some what I would consider essential services hindered because of some of the cuts that have both in terms of financial resources and human resources that simply are no longer. And believe me, those agencies were stretched thin to begin with.
Yeah, they were.
It's not like that there was a lot of waste there. I can assure you there was very little waste going on, and I think they were all very cost conscious and doing everything they could to provide the maximum return on their investment, whether it was services in-house or those that they supported through grants and contracts to state and local government.
It's unnerving that we have to hope, isn't it, that what eventually helps that sort of momentum and tide reverse. Hopefully it's not an outbreak or something bad that makes a lot of people sick, although clearly that's an option on the board.
It's effective. Yeah, it's very effective. Look at Jack in the Box. That changed the way of doing business, and that was 30 years ago plus. And again, and I certainly don't want to demean the current food safety of that company, but as a point, it was an outbreak that really got a lot of people's attention.
That was a seismic moment.
I think it's going to be the case, and the other thing with even the tariffs, we may be, because we're not being in this country, we're not producing enough food to meet the demand, so we're going to have to do this. And so my concern is other countries are going to start cutting corners just to sort of accommodate the additional costs that the tariffs are imposing. So maybe we're not going to get as good a quality product. Maybe they're not going to have as good of inspection services in those countries, and maybe we won't have any U.S. based inspections taking place at
Wow.
those. Again, I think the major companies, they will. They understand the liability is too great for them not to. But that's not everybody, and there's still a lot of food being served by companies and establishments that are not part of a major corporation.
That is, I don't think that's really been talked about much as one of the unintended consequences of that. But you're right. If you have to import, because you can't just skip the food, everybody has to eat. So it has to come from somewhere. And if you lose supply chain or control over auditing that, there's a risk. Wow, it's not really actually all that pleasant to think about, but
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
yeah.
We're going to hope for the best, but
Yeah.
we have to be realistic at the same time.
Yeah, and
There's no doubt about
it
it.
underscores.
And again, I'm cautiously optimistic that in time and hopefully sooner than later, things will return more to normal in Washington. But right now, it's still I think, in a state of chaos, and even the people there who are working on the inside of the agency say, we don't know from one day to the next what's going to happen, and that even as just sort of an environment to work in is less than optimal for sure.
Definitely not ideal. Quickly here, if you'll indulge me, we've had a lot of really great reception to this since we've dropped it, all thanks to people like Dr. McSwane, but starting to get a lot of feedback, comments, emails from viewers, and wanted to just share a couple. And the second one here, I actually want to get your take on because it pertains specifically to food inspections. Someone commenting on something from a separate episode. First one here, though, is from a person I've worked with a long time. Really like this guy in Multnomah County, Oregon, Nick Lopez. And Nick, I believe it was after episode 3, but I could have that wrong, maybe in a different one, said, I was struck and loved your comment in conversation with the guest on the obscurity that environmental health labors in. He said, it actually reminded me of what I learned when I started working in Multnomah County about public health at large. If you have a steady job, medical benefits, a home, stable family, and a good support system, you likely have no idea what the county does. That was me before I started to work there, as Nick went on to say. The county is the last line for a lot of people, the last lifeline. That support is for prenatal babies, public safety of the food supply, identifying deceased people that are unidentified, etc. He goes, it was a real eye-opener. That's what I love about working in Multnomah County Environmental Health. That's why I stayed. So, Nick, appreciate you watching and for those words. I think it just speaks to the passion that these folks have. They are not there for fame and fortune. They're there for passion. We have another viewer email here from, I love the handles. This one came from one of the streaming platforms as a comment. Remember the Minions. Remember the Minions posts. I'm a registered sanitarian at a county health department. Thanks for posting. Really great discussion with Steve Mandernock and the phrase floor, walls, and ceiling inspection really is going to stick with me. I know there's a lot of inspectors that needed to hear that and understand the concept of looking at processes, risk factors, etc., over checking boxes on a form. And that's such a great way to give it a name, a floors, walls, and ceiling inspection. It's a good way to help inspectors and food managers to see the forest for the trees. It will be sticking with me. Remember the Minions. Thank you for that. And actually, I wanted to do that one there and then throw that one to you, Dr. McSwane. What Steve was talking about, generally along the same lines, was that people can get into such a box checking mode that the inspection, no matter how long you hang out in the facility, wasn't actually that effective. What's your thoughts on that and on helping inspectors to step out of the box and actually use analytical skills on real risk factors?
Well, and I think there's a couple of things that are involved here. One is I think we're now seeing a revolution in terms of the technology that's available to assist in the inspections. So that enables the people to do what I would consider a more efficient job, and probably do it more quickly than in the past. But I think, again, we need to get back to this concept of risk-based. You got to focus on the things not only of the establishment itself, but the things within an establishment that are the most likely to cause or elevate the risk associated with potential outbreak of a foodborne illness. So again, we have a lot of tools available like HACCP, and we can certainly use the digital technology to help. But I think it really, this again is sort of part of that changing the mindset so that we're not doing floors, walls, and ceilings anymore. Floors, walls, and ceilings though can be important, because if you've got a backup of sewage on the floor, that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, is it got litter on the floor? That's one thing. But if there's a sewage backup, which you could argue may be a plumbing problem, but still the floor becomes important. If you've got
less than
rub marks
ideal
on the wall, then that may be a rodent infestation. That could be a problem, though it's not the wall's fault. It's the rodent's fault. So I think this is where you have to sort of, be both myopic and look at it from the broadest perspective, to say, we need to focus on anything that has the potential of increasing the risk of foodborne illness. But that usually involves hygiene. It involves temperature control. CDC has decades worth of data to tell us exactly what the most common contributing factors are to foodborne illness. That should be the basis for the programs of inspections that are occurring. And it's not just at the local level. This could be at the state level. This could be at the corporate level. This could be for the third-party auditing companies. This is what they need to be looking at. So but it definitely is. We again, as we're trying to do more with less, we don't have the luxury to spend and expend our resources on things that aren't going to provide a very significant rate of return.
Not enough juice for the squeeze in a lot of cases. So you touched on technology twice, and you're 100% right about it. And thank HS GovTech for underwriting and sponsoring this show and channel in general. And obviously there are a lot of great, especially for permitting and inspections, there's a lot of great technology there. Actually more interested in getting your thoughts on, because in my day job and in the technical world and working with a ton of departments, and I'm seeing some very exciting things that I think they're going to come here whether we like it or not with AI. But one of the things that actually I think has a lot of potential is a bespoke AI that's just trained on, maybe that state's inspection data, or maybe inspection data from the local jurisdiction, the state, and the country overall, to do more AI-based analysis to say, if you zoom out from just this unit and this one city, facilities with these attributes, make sure you check this, this, and this before you leave there, because the probability is a lot higher. What's your thought on AI in general, and do you think it ultimately can help in terms of doing more bespoke, detailed inspections on what matters?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that AI is something that is in our future. My concern has been, though, with the whole digital concept, is we've collected an immense amount of data, but we don't tend to use it very well.
That's so true.
Yeah. And I think, that's the key. It's like anything else. You can have the best data collection system in the world. You can collect the best data, but if nobody's looking at it, and in some cases too, it may be that the people that are looking at it aren't the people who are making the decisions about how this will impact operations in the establishment. And this could be both in terms of the industry as well as in terms of the regulatory community. But, I think that is the key. Don't just collect it and do nothing with it. You've got to make sure that you're analyzing it, you're looking for trends, you establish baselines, and then see how things are changing over time. It also helps you to know if the programs you're implementing as a result are having an impact. And if they are, great. If they're not, then you better look for something different. So, and I think all of this is something that's going to be beneficial. But I think that the people who are in the IT business, they're probably going to have a much bigger part of food safety in the future than what they definitely had in the past. And I think hopefully we'll all benefit, because, I'm thoroughly convinced that things are not that different from one jurisdiction to the next, from one state to the next. It may be, there's maybe some different cultures involved, but in the grand scheme of things, food safety and the principles and practices we employ are not going to vary that much from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So if we find something that works in one place, it probably would work well someplace else. So then it becomes a matter of communication. And that's why we just established a communication standing committee with NCFP, because we want to make sure that we're doing our fair share to push these things out, to create awareness and buy-in and get people using things that we believe really do work and will have a positive impact on not only the industry, but certainly on the public health and well-being of consumers.
That's really well said. And you're so right. I think sometimes people overthink because maybe they have a slightly different couple of sections in their ordinance or things of that nature. They think they're very dramatically different from the rest of their peers around the country. And it leads you to do the opposite of sharing and collaborating because you think you're so unique. And you're right. A lot of the core underlying data that could make decisions so much more powerful and better, especially for health and safety, the data's pretty the same for those core elements around. That's just such a great point. The other thing it strikes me as you're describing, I love what you said because it's just so true. We collect 20, 30 years worth of data, but never look at it. And you're describing the difference between collecting the data and actually adopting into the heart of your culture, the integration and usage of it. That second part's way harder, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. But unfortunately, that's really where you make the greatest impact is taking that information that you have, following it, finding out where you have gaps, finding out where you're doing things right, continue to do what's right, and try to help rectify the things that perhaps are not having the kind of impact that you would want. And this has to be continuous. This is something, and it will change. And it changes as the nature of the products that you sell will change. It changes as the vendors you use will change. It's going to change, I think, as a result of tariffs, because you're going to be buying from countries that maybe you've never purchased products from before. And it may be that the countries you have been buying from that you'll continue to buy from are going to be, doing things a lot differently and in an effort to cut costs to sort of, again, to adjust to the impact of the tariff. So it's going to be a crazy time, but it's going to be an exciting time. And I do think that I have enough confidence in our industry and our regulators that they're gonna get the job done, but it may not be without a little bit of rough seas in the process.
For sure. So before as we sort of head in towards a conclusion, people always say, "Hey, be sure to ask everybody this," and it's fun. Distinguished career, professor, etc. I'm going to ask you kind of at the lowest base level on this question. You've been a sanitarian, you've been in the field, you've run departments at the local level, you've really done it all. Anybody who's done that for any length of time has a few stories indelibly etched into their mind that may not even be believable, but you were there, you observed it, or somebody on your team did. I assume you're no different.
Oh yeah. My career is full of stories. Some of which I really probably can't relate, some of which I probably shouldn't relate. Couple of things that I will always stick in my mind. I had, when I was working at the health department in Monroe County, I had an inspector, and it was a young person, and they were reasonably new on the job, and they were really very gung-ho in their job, and we're doing a great job. Called me up one time, and he said, "You got to come out to this so-and-so establishment." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, I took the slicer apart and I can't get it put back together." And I said, "Well, that is mistake number one. You never take somebody's equipment apart, no matter how much you want to check to see whether or not there's hidden contamination there. You never take it apart. You let them take it apart, or you say, hey, you need to have your service person, whoever works for the manufacturer of this machine, to come in and do that." The other one that I'll remember for as long as I live, had a young guy, and again, this was a typical teenager working in a fast food establishment, and they were making deli sandwiches. And he of course, knew I was there, went to the hand sink, went through the whole process, did the 20 seconds, and did the soap and friction and the drying of the towels and all that, and then went over and grabbed one of the buns that he was going to use to make the sandwich with. And I said, now, the idea is, and I appreciate you wash your hands, but to be really kind of up to the maximum safety, we really would prefer no bare hand contact. He said, oh, yeah. He said, yeah, we got gloves for that. And I said, well, where are the gloves? And he reached in his back pocket and he pulled out a disposable glove and he put it on. He said, mine was right here all along. And I said, well, we know what the disposable glove is. We just don't know that it's not reusable. So, but that one is one that I will always remember, because he really thought that he'd washed his hands and he had forgotten to put the glove on, but it didn't dawn on him. You're supposed to get a clean pair of gloves every time he washed his hands.
Just slides it back in his pocket and
yeah. Don't know how often he used it, but he, every time he took it off and put it on, we don't know if it was reversible or not, but it was just one of those things that will from a food safety standpoint, it probably wasn't as funny, but you had to be there just to see. And he was so sincere about it, and he thought that was it. He always had his glove with him, but it happened to be in his back pocket.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Is there anything, whether it's going on with Conference for Food Protection, or just as you look out at the landscape right now, that we haven't talked about, that's on your mind, that you feel the community, especially around food protection and food safety, should have hit on, or they should hear?
I think we pretty much covered the waterfront. Actually, I would encourage all of the viewers, if they want to know more about CFP, obviously our website is a great source of information, and it's just www.foodprotect.org. But we will have information about all of our committees once they're up and running, both council and standing. They should feel free to reach out to me. My email address is just dmcswain.cfp@gmail.com. And again, that's provided on the website. So if they would like to reach me, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions they might have about the conference, and how they could become an active part of the conference. Then we would welcome their participation.
Yeah, and I can't encourage everybody who's in this field, who's watching or listening to this enough, do it. And so if you look in the description of wherever you're listening or watching this, you'll see his email address, a direct link to join. Again, for $100, and then you show up to the conference in Grand Rapids. You don't have to pay for that. Yeah, you don't have to pay the $100 anymore. It's too good to be true, but it is. So we'll put all of that in there. And as we get closer, you go through this next 18 months or so as you prep for Grand Rapids in 2027. Anytime you have an issue item or just something you want to talk about, or have somebody from the organization talk about, please let us know. You're welcome back anytime. And I thank you so much. You're such a busy guy. And actually, I did mean to ask you, you've written a lot. Are you writing still, or anything actively that you've been working on recently from that perspective? It's a lot of work to write.
Yeah, not so much. We do update our training series. As you said, the Safe Mark Guide to Food Safety. We do update that each time the food code is a new version is issued. But and I've been working through the Retail Food Safety Regulatory Association Collaborative that has helped us. And again, that is a lot of member organizations such as CFP, as well as FDA and CDC. We have been doing some research for them in conjunction with NACCHO, and we've got a manuscript that we're working on right now. But that's sort of in the rearview mirror for me. I'm an emeritus professor, and I'd kind of like to leave it at that. But this happens to be things that I think really will provide good information for the industry, as well as the regulatory communities. And so I'm happy to be involved in that. But not too much writing anymore. There's too much to keep CFP functioning at the high level that I wanted to. So
yeah, fair enough.
Something had to go, and it was a lot of the writing.
That makes total sense. Dr. McSwane, thank you. Like literally a contribution unlike only very few that you've made, especially in the area of food safety and Honored that you come sit down with us for an hour and change and talk about it and share the benefit of your experience and wisdom with the group around the country.
It's been my pleasure. And again, feel free to reach out anytime. We'd be more than happy to talk. I'm always excited about an opportunity to introduce people to CFP.
We will definitely talk again in this format in the future. Dr. David McSwane, Executive Director of the Conference for Food Protection. Please check out the details. You can join them, their website, his email address, all in the description. For the Beyond Data Management podcast, powered by HS GovTech, I'm Cameron Garrison. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and we'll see you next week.